Hi everyone, this is Bitter Corella. Um, it's been kind of weighing on me that I have a Patreon and I'm not really doing anything with it, so I thought maybe I'd try and make a little bit of exclusive content just for folks on the Patreon. I wasn't really sure what to do, so I'm going to probably try out a few things, but I did used to do a public access horror host show before pandemic. And I thought maybe it's time to bring a little bit of a little of that back and do some discussions about horror and horror literature because that was a lot of fun. So this is going to be kind of a dry run for that. See how it works out. And for this first one, obviously, I haven't put a lot of effort into it. Not really using the good camera, but hopefully there won't be a huge problem. We'll just see how it goes. Um, and for the first one, I also thought I'm not actually going to discuss horror. I'm going to discuss something that um, it is technically not horror, but it has become part of my brand, and that is J.K. Rowling. And specifically, I wanted to talk about J.K. Rowling's latest doorstopper, The Ink Black Heart, because I attempted to read this book for research purposes, and it defeated me. I read up to chapter 30 out of like 108 chapters. I got up to this point and I realized I was about 26% of the way through the book, and I just gave up. I was like, "There's no way. This is terrible. It's not going to get better from here." So I stopped. But so just to say that, like, so full disclosure, I have not read the entire book, but I feel like I gave it a game attempt. I tried, and having read this the first section of the book, I feel like I have a sense of what it's all about and where it's going and what J.K. Rowling was really doing with this book. And quite frankly, it's baffling, and that's why I wanted to talk about it a little, because this book is absolutely bonkers. It is probably the worst book that I have ever read, and I've read a lot of bad books, but I've never read a book that's so up its own ass, to use the parlance of our times. It's extremely long, meandering, it's tedious, it's boring. It's not really going anywhere. Really, what this is when you read it, it's J.K. Rowling's manifesto. J.K. Rowling, she is denied this, but let's read between the lines. Let's be honest here. This is J.K. Rowling being big mad online. She's mad that people have been yelling at her on the internet, and she's going to tell you all about how she has been unfairly maligned by the internet people. And that doesn't, it's funny because we live in a time where the internet has completely bled over into real life. It's not like in the old days when I was young, where, oh, something's online, we'll just log off. You'll be fine. Nowadays, there's stalking and doxing and all sorts of ways that your real life, that the internet is not just a place you go anymore. It's now like another layer over real life. So you could actually make a very compelling thriller about this topic. The problem is that J.K. Rowling really hasn't experienced those things online. There's a lot of people that have had their lives threatened, have had their livelihoods threatened online, who could probably actually parlay that into using that life experience into an actual good story about the horrors of online canceling or whatever. J.K. Rowling, the worst is that people are kind of mean to her online, so she writes this enormous book all about how people are, they're kind of mean to her online, and it's just not very compelling reading. Um, and what really makes it strange to me is, now I have always, to give credit where it's due, I've always maintained that J.K. Rowling's strength is that she's a good storyteller. I've read the Harry Potter books. Many of us have. I read them when I was younger, and I thought they were actually fairly decent. I mean, they're not great prose. J.K. Rowling is not a particularly gifted writer, but her real strength was in spinning a yarn. So she can tell a story so that you always feel like you're progressing. You never feel like you're just like spinning your wheels. You always want to know what happens next. So they're just page turners. And I had assumed that um, her foray into adult fiction, the Cormorant Strike series, would probably be similar to that. But having read The Ink Black Heart, I realized that's not the case at all. In fact, J.K. Rowling, I have to reassess my earlier praise of her that she's a good storyteller, because she's not actually. And I realized that it was kind of a bluff with Harry Potter, because the big thing in Harry Potter is that like there's always like new like weird magic stuff happening. So you're always like, "Oh, what's this new weird magic? I want to know what that is." And so that's what keeps you reading. Turns out the characters are actually not that interesting in Harry Potter. In fact, they're kind of annoying, especially when J.K. Rowling attempts to do like teenage angst, and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna yeah, this is gonna be adult now," and it's just like, oh my god, these characters, why are they fighting all the time? Just talk it out a little bit. Come on, this is ridiculous. And Cormoran Strike is a lot like that, because most of the book. So I read, like I said, about 30%. The main mystery of the book, is not even introduced until about 25 chapters in. So for most of the beginning of the book, you're just wasting time, where our main hero, who is the detective Cormorant Strike, and his gal pal Friday, Robin Ellicott, they just kind of go to different restaurants and talk about the mundane minutia of running a detective agency. And that goes on and on, and I think J.K. Rowling thought like we'd be really invested in this like, oh, will they, won't they, super couple type thing going on here. And maybe if you've read the previous 6 books in this series, you may have some investment in that relationship. But I personally feel like detective story, especially like kind of this sort of, I guess this would kind of be I guess it's sort of a cozy mystery in a sense. It's not really noir. It's Cormoran Strike himself. He's kind of in the mold of a Rumple detective. So he feels like he's supposed to be a little bit hard boiled. But in general, this isn't really. This is pretty cozy. But still, a cozy mystery really depends on you liking the characters and wanting to see more of them. And the problem is that Cormorant and Robin spend most of this book bitching about their respective like boyfriends and girlfriends, and their exes. Everyone in this book is divorced. This is the most divorced book I've ever read. Everyone's got an ex, and they all hate their exes. A lot. Like, we actually meet Cormoran Strike's ex, and I kind of assumed, oh, his ex shows up, and they've mentioned her earlier in the book, and it seems like, oh, she's probably just this angry Spitfire, and Cormorant and his ex, they're now that they're no longer together, they can be civil to each other, even though they probably spar a bit. It's probably just these two very strong personalities who weren't meant for each other. Well, it turns out that's not the case. His ex is a real bitch, and she and Cormorant just like scream at each other, like they really hate each other, and just are like about like a hair's breadth from just straight out yelling slurs at each other. So, and everyone kind of is like that with their exes. Everyone is cheating on their exes. Everyone's exes are cheating on them. I know that J.K. Rowling's had some bad relationships in the past, and it really feels like she's working stuff out through this book. And that's not even most of it. So, the main plot of this book, as it were, is that there is a cartoon called The Ink-Stained Heart. It's on YouTube. Everyone agrees that this is the weirdest, creepiest, strangest web cartoon ever. Now, it is described to us, the reader, a little bit, and it just sounds like salad fingers. So, I mean, I guess if you're like, like a 56-year-old multi-billionaire who lives in a Scottish castle, maybe that's really weird to you. But if you're like, a goblin like me, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. That's like Tuesday. But anyway, there's this cartoon. It's online. It becomes very popular, has a huge following. And so some of the fans go a little cuckoo bananas and decide that they don't like the person who made the cartoon because she's too successful now. They're jealous of her success, I guess. So they decide that they're going to destroy her life. And that's basically, again, this is like, oh, J.K. Rowling, you're working through your own stuff. You apparently believe that everyone is mad at you online because you're too cool. Um, and whatever. I mean, obviously, a lot of us are jealous of success, but it's not really a very compelling story if like your villains are just like cartoon characters, which all of the characters in this book are like that. They're all kind of cartoonish and exaggerated. They feel like caricatures. It doesn't help that J.K. Rowling always likes to write things out in different accents. So if someone is like Scouse or Cockney, you get to read the weird accents they talk in, and it really feels like she's just kind of making fun of people. She does that a lot. And that sort of thing kind of flew in Harry Potter because, first of all, that was a children's book, so you kind of expect things to be a little cartoonish. And it was a fantasy book, so you kind of think, oh, these wizards have a different. They live in a different world. It's a culture where these kind of goofy, cartoonish people are just normal. That's expected. But when you're in a detective story for adults, ostensibly set in our world, the real world, these things become a little harder to swallow. So J.K. Rowling has like not changed her style at all when she's trying to write for adults as opposed to writing for kids. So that's kind of weird. But anyway, so the cartoon, the fans are mad at the cartoon for being too successful. So they're gonna get together online and they're gonna take down the woman who made the cartoon. And a large portion of this book, especially the first 30 chapters, are excerpts from like web forums and chat logs where where the fans of this web cartoon are talking to each other and discussing their plans. Little hair in my mouth to take down the person who created the cartoon. These sections are very weird because J.K. Rowling has a real, even though she's extremely online, she kind of has a tin ear for the way people write online. So of course everyone is speaking in these big super villain monologues where they're really explaining step by step what's going on. And then of course a big issue is that anything that happens in the web forum then happens again when Cormorant Strike and his girl Friday, Robin, find out about it. So you're getting the same information twice. So it's really redundant. These web sections are also just oddly organized because they're kind of, you'll have one column where it's a chat log, and then several of the moderators will open a private channel, and that's in another column. And the whole time, I'm having a really hard time trying to figure out which order I'm supposed to read stuff in. So these sections are not only redundant, but just confusing. I actually started skipping them toward the end because they didn't seem to actually bring out any new information. And also, these channels will have like 20 or 30 different people talking in them, which I guess does capture the way that dialogue happens online, where it's just a free-for-all. But it's really hard to remember who's talking, especially because it's like, well, are any of these people going to be important later on? Because that happens a lot in this book, too. In the very first chapter, when Cormorant Strike and Robin are hanging out in a restaurant, J.K. Rowling says that they are self-described best friends hanging out in this restaurant, which is an odd thing to say considering all best friends are self-described. That's the way it works. You declare yourself best friends. You don't get like, I don't know, like a certificate from the government or something that says you're a best friend. I don't know what's up with that. But they're at this restaurant talking, and there's a silver-haired man sitting at the bar looking appreciatively at Robin. And J.K. Rowling brings him up several times. Just Robin doesn't notice him watching her, like neither does Strike. He's just there, and the narrator keeps saying that he's watching them and kind of like leering at Robin, who is, I guess she's supposed to be very hot, but also very virginal. See, because she had, J.K. Rowling brings up she had a sexual assault in her past, so therefore she doesn't just jump into bed with any man. She's very chaste and modest because of a sexual assault. And I understand that J.K. Rowling wanted to indicate, oh yeah, like Robin, she's not like other girls. She's no slut. She almost got raped, and that's why she's not a slut. It's kind of weird. It's a little, uh, it feels a little tone deaf, but anyway. So they keep describing this guy, and I figured, oh, he must be like important. He must show up again later in the book. He didn't. He hasn't shown up again in the first 30 chapters. And from what I understand from reading summaries, he doesn't show up again at all. So he's just there window dressing so that J.K. Rowling can indicate, hey, Robin's hot because this dude is like checking her out. So there's a lot of people and being introduced, and half of them are just not important at all to the plot. In that first chapter, when Strike and Robin are talking, they introduce like Strike's ex, his ex's new boyfriend, Robin's ex, Robin's roommate, Robin's roommate's boyfriend, Robin's roommate's boyfriend's dog. These characters are all listed and named, and you're wondering, are these people going to be important? Are they going to come up again? Do I need to remember these names? And apparently you don't, because none of them show up again at all, or even are mentioned within the first 30 chapters. And if they are mentioned later than that, probably they should have been introduced for the first time when they actually come on stage, and not just these characters talking about them. So it's a slog. You're trying to remember all these names and put them together, and I'm like, what is going on here? J.K. Rowling, I'm sorry, these are amateur level mistakes. You've been writing for what, 30 years? You're the richest writer in the world. If we live in a meritocracy, by that logic, you should be the best writer in the whole world. What happened here? And even though I did say that now I've reassessed J.K. Rowling's earlier work, and I realized, like, oh, she's really not that great a storyteller, the fact remains that the Harry Potter books are still head and shoulders above this. I assume what really happened was J.K. Rowling just got too famous and too rich, and now no one can edit her. So now we're getting the unfiltered J.K. Rowling manifesto. And so now everything's on the page. Nothing's getting cut. And, oh boy. So 30 pages, during which we don't get into the main mystery. There's a lot of talk, again, of the mundane day-to-day things that detective agency does. And maybe, I guess J.K. Rowling did some research into how a detective agency works, and she wanted, to be a little realistic here. And unfortunately, J.K. Rowling has a bad, very bad sense of when to be realistic and when to exaggerate. Because generally, a detective agency in a book, when you read about it, it's usually like, hey, it's a detective and probably his secretary, or one assistant, his Watson maybe, and they're always going from one case to the next. They're always struggling to keep the lights on because they gotta. When's the next case coming in, right? Instead, this detective agency that Cormoran Strike runs is very successful and popular, and he's actually getting a lot of press. And because of that, he himself can't do a lot of detective work because he's going to be recognized. So instead, he hires a lot of contractors to go and do the actual legwork for him, which I gather is how an actual detective agency works. But it's also not very interesting because it's like, well, shouldn't our main hero be doing these things? Also, it's like, when you realize most actual detective work is pretty boring. It's mostly just, getting hired by, angry wives to trail their cheating husbands and stuff like that. And therefore, the first 30 chapters, where we mostly just talk about these boring auxiliary cases that the detective agency is handling, They're that sort of thing, and we keep hearing about them, and it's like, okay, I don't care about these. Why are we still talking about this? When do we get to the actual? When do we get to the fireworks factory? Because one of these cases, and this kind of struck me. The detectives in the detective agency codename it Groomer, which, considering that we are living in a time when that is increasingly being used as a slur against queer people, and J.K. Rowling is very on record as having some very problematic opinions about queer people. That seems like a choice. Um, Now, the codename Groomer case is basically a woman hires Cormoran Strike's detective agency to trail her boyfriend, who she thinks is having an affair with her teenage daughter. So that's not actually any queer stuff involved, but still an interesting choice of words, I think. And this case is weird because they follow him around and they get proof. They get like photos of him with the daughter, so they bring it to the mother, and then all the detectives are talking about how they're going to have to convince the girl to stop seeing the boyfriend because yeah, like they're gonna have to do like a intervention, and it's weird because like you're not counselors, you're detectives. You were only hired to get evidence that this is happening. You have gotten the evidence and given it to the client. The job is over. Why are you still doing this? Why have you now decided that you should be involved in breaking up that that relationship? That's not what you're being paid to do. I mean, I guess they just decide, oh, it's we should total this is bad, and it's bad, but you're detectives. You're not. I don't know why you're still involved. Um, so that's that. We get a lot about that. Meanwhile, with the ostensible main plot of the book, the Ink Black Heart, um, the creator of the cartoon eventually, after many, many chapters, comes to the detective agency and says to Robin, Robin, I'm having these internet people ruin my life. I need your help. And Robin says, nah, I don't feel like it. Nope. So Robin resists the call to adventure, and within a chapter, the woman, the Edie Ledwell is her name, she gets murdered, and she's dead. So good job, Robin. Uh, so then, now that Edie Ledwell is dead, and her boyfriend Josh, who's also involved in the creation of this cartoon, he's in a coma at this point. So their agents come to Cormorant and Robin and say like, "Hey, you remember that person that like tried to hire you and you refused the case, and now she's dead? We want to hire you, I guess, for reasons." And this time they're like, "Yeah, this is good. We'll take this case." So now they're taking the case. And a big part of it seems to be that Edie Ledwell, when she showed up, she was like kind of goth. And so Robin was all like, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think I'm taking this case. But when like some respectable agents come to them, they're like, oh yeah, we'll take this case. Because I guess, respectability is important. So the agents say to Cormorant and to Robin, we want to hire you to find out who this internet troll is. Anomi is the internet troll's name, who started the whole thing against Edie Ledwell. So they're like, we want you to find out this troll's name because there's going to be an Ink Machine cartoon. Sorry, a movie. We're making Slendy and the Ink Machine into a feature film. By the way, the contracts are all signed. Edie Ledwell's dead. Josh is in a coma. We're making this movie. It's just happening. There's no where nothing's going to stop it. But before he went into a coma, Josh said, "I would really like to know the identity of this internet troll. And so, therefore, as a courtesy to the guy in the coma, we are hiring a detective to find out the identity of this internet troll. There's really no reason at this point, because things are in motion. They're going to make money on this movie no matter what, but we're going to find it. We want to know. We just want to know. We want Josh to feel better in his coma dream now that the identity of the troll is revealed. And they say, the agents literally say, the reason that they want to know the identity of the troll isn't to initiate legal proceedings or anything, if they could. They want to put her on blast and put the troll on blast and cancel the troll. They mention how there's like a lot of people who they would be willing to dogpile this troll if the troll's identity were known. So literally they're like, just want to dox this person, which is kind of fucked up, but I guess J.K. Rowling is like, hey, turnabout's fair play, so fuck you. So that's their plan. They want to know the identity of this troll so that they can dox him. And so from this point on, it's mostly chapters of Cormoran Strike following suspects around and watching to see if they ever use their cell phones at the same time that Anomi posts tweets on Twitter. And the other thing that we get for the first after this point is like characters printing out reams of paper with tweets on them so that they can read the tweets when they're away from a computer. And I guess I feel like even if you're 56 years old, like I feel like you wouldn't print out tweets. I mean, I might, but I'm a big Luddite. I feel like a normal person would just be like, well, I'm just going to read them on Twitter. I'm not going to print out all these tweets on paper. But that's what they do. This happens again and again where people just print out tweets to read them. And we get to read all the tweets. J.K. Rowling has all these fake tweets that she's written. And then under each one, she'll explain in detail why the tweet is bad and wrong. And in fact, the person who wrote it is a bad person for attacking Edie Ledwell for no reason. No reason. Now, a lot of the accusations made against Edie Ledwell in this are, they kind of mirror the rhetoric of social justice. And, that's, I'm sure, not a coincidence because J.K. Rowling has received a lot of criticism for not only her transphobia, but, her fat phobia, her ableism, her weirdly anti-Semitic goblins. So, so I think she's had her fill of this sort of thing. She's kind of pissed off. So we get a lot of that. Like, for example, there's in the cartoon, the Inkwell Heart, there's a character who's a worm. So some of the tweets criticizing the Inkwell are all like, oh, this is NB-phobic because the worm is a hermaphrodite and therefore, this is a criticism against, non-binary people. And, to some degree, you gotta laugh because, yeah, there are a lot of bad faith attacks against people that have learned to use this kind of language. And that's kind of a funny yet not entirely inaccurate takedown of that kind of language. Now, a lot of people, there's been a lot of ink spilled about whether or not this book is transphobic, because I think, everyone knows J.K. Rowling, hates trans people. She's made that very clear. I'm not going to relitigate that. I think it's obvious. But, she's too smart to say it. So, she's always got to talk in code because she's smart like a snake. And so a lot of kind of dim bulb pundits were like, okay, so is this book transphobic? I don't know. And so they were talking about that, and the consensus was that it's generally not. So I would agree. There, as far as I can tell, there aren't any trans characters in this book. The thing about the worm being an MB is a very small part of it. What some of the characters, or at least one, is described as being non-binary, but like that isn't, as far as I can tell, a major part of the character. What it really is, it's kind of like background information to inform our understanding of this particular character. Because this is one of the trolls that is mad at Edie Ledwell of the Ink Black Heart. And this troll is described in her own Twitter bio as being non-binary, she, they, spoony, with, I think, fibromyalgia, and some other autoimmune issues. And really what that is, I feel like you read that and you're supposed to read that bio and be like, oh, one of them. Yes, I know. One of those annoying people from the internet. One of those blah, blah, blah people from the internet. It's kind of like when you're watching an 80s movie and you see someone like smoking in while they're taking a bath, and it's never remarked upon, but you're instantly supposed to be like, oh, that's a shady character. I can tell because that informs me the fact that they smoke cigarettes while in the bathtub. Mm. And that's kind of the same thing here. We're supposed to look at this and be like, oh, yeah, this is this character. Oh, they're non-binary. They're probably really annoying. They probably talk too much. And that's really the characterization we get of this particular character. She's very annoying. She's also what we would call, she's disabled, but in a bad way. Now, Cormoran Strike himself in this book is also disabled, but he's got a good disability. See, he lost his leg in the war. He lost it in service. He's a veteran, and we salute Cormoran Strike for his service, because he doesn't want no charity. He doesn't want no pity. He's gonna pull himself up by his bootstraps and not let his disability keep him down. So when he actually reads the Twitter of this person with the fibromyalgia, where she's just whining all the time about how hard it is to live in constant pain, and he's like, well, not like me. I'm a real manly He-Man, and I don't let my disability keep me down. So, that there's a real, we can read the tongue out. Actual pain is having your hair get in your mouth all the time. Ugh. So there's a contrast there, and I think it really speaks to J.K. Rowling's understanding of disability, and just the fact that, like, okay, you deserve sympathy if you have a deserving disability. Otherwise, fuck you. So yeah, this particular character that I mentioned, who is non-binary and also disabled, there's a lot of mention in this book about how pretty she is. Like when they first see her, it's, oh, she's very pretty. And again, I'm kind of reading between the lines here. But the real implication to me is it's very much like, oh, she's got such a pretty face. She could really make something of herself if only she applied herself instead of whining on the internet about a cartoon. So that's really, that kind of, these things, again, it's subtext, but it comes through pretty loud and clear, I think. J.K. Rowling, and it's funny that like J.K. Rowling is just putting it all out there, and she thinks like, I'm being subtle. People will definitely take my side in all this because, oh man, don't you hate those annoying people online? And actually, she's probably not wrong. A lot of people do hate annoying people online. We all hate annoying people online. The problem is most of us are annoying people online. And hopefully, if we're self-aware, we're just kind of like, eh. I mean, I don't know why you're making your internet beef into a book that's like that thick. I saw this book for sale when I went to Worldcon in Chicago. It's literally this thick. It's like they sell it per pound. I was looking, I was like, how can it possibly be that thick? It's because most of it is just internet chat logs, like I mentioned. So Cormoran Strike is he's got a good disability, and let's talk a little more about our man Cormoran Strike. He's the hero of this book. He's our, Rumple detective, and his main thing, he's ugly. He's very ugly. J.K. Rowling likes to mention this. He's fat, which is bad in J.K. Rowling world. He's missing a leg, so he's disabled. It's also bad. He's got hair that looks like pubes. Like he's got curly hair, but they keep talking about how it looks like pubes, which is kind of, I mean, okay. I've never, I don't know. I've seen a lot of people with curly hair, and I've never been like, hey, you got fucking pubes on your head, huh? What's up with that? Now, as someone who has pubic hair, it doesn't really look like curly head hair. I mean, it's kind of different, but anyway, that's how she describes it. And also, oh, and Cormoran Strike, he also smells. He just reeks because he smokes too much. He's a rumple detective. He smokes like a fucking chimney. And so he's got all the, and on top of all that, he does have an actually extremely repellent personality. Like, throughout most of this book, I think it's supposed to be like, oh, he's a charming curmudgeon, but he's mostly kind of an asshole and extremely sexist. He's always like making remarks, especially about his ex-wife, that it's like, basically just calling her a slut to her face when she shows up. And he's dating this other woman who's like a fashionista, and he really fucking hates her too. He's always going over to her house and just complaining about how she's into woman things like jewelry and gemstones. And she is all like, oh, Cormorant Strike, you know what I like about you? I like how you don't pretend to be interested in anything I do or say. Like, you just cannot be bothered to even, like, put up a facade of interest. And that is incredibly sexy. I mean, women fucking love that. They love to be negged. And Cormorant Strike is the king of negs because all he does in this entire book is neg on his girlfriend and go over to her house, complain that she doesn't feed him. He goes over and she's all like, oh, we're gonna go to a fancy restaurant. Ooh, we're gonna have cucumber sandwiches. This fancy fare. And Cormorant Strike is like, well, I want a cheeseburger. I'm a big fat man. I need a big fat cheeseburger. I'll go insane. So there's a lot of that going on. At the end of the book, he breaks up with her, and it's kind of like, thank fucking God, these two are clearly not meant to be, because of course Madeline only existed as a romantic obstacle to prevent Robin and Cormorant from getting together. They've been doing this for 6 books, and they don't get together in this book either because Robin dates a policeman. So for the first half of the book, she's mostly complaining about her ex and then complaining about other guys that she dates or gets set up with because they're divorced and they're depressed and only talk about their exes, even though that's also what she does. But eventually, like the cops who come to talk to Cormorant Strike and Robin about the death of Edie Ledwell, one of those cops asks Robin out on a date, which seems kind of like a breach of ethics, but I guess then they start dating, so it's fine. It's fine. So that means that once again, Cormorant Strike and Robin are blocked from getting together. You'll have to read book 8 to find out how that works out. Excuse me. So, Cormorant Strike is, like I said, he's an asshole. He's ugly. He smells. Yet somehow his girlfriend is strangely attracted to him. She can't get enough of him. She is ravenous for the D. And it's not just her. All through the book, they keep repeating, he's just a sexual dynamo. Women are throwing themselves at his feet, mostly because I get, they all want a daddy figure, and it's, he's a real man. He's a real man, this Cormorant Strike. He doesn't spend his time whining on the internet. He spends his time mostly eating takeaway. Because when they're not going to restaurants and bistros and pubs and bars, they're getting takeaway. There's a lot of takeaway. And they give Cormorant Strike the farts. They give him just like searing gas pains. And this is described, I guess it's supposed to make him a little relatable, because I mean we've all had gas, we all know what that's like. It's like when you, it's kind of funny because it's like when, you know, like when you're watching a romantic comedy and they're like, oh, we got to give our heroine some like a quirky little flaw. Oh, she's really clumsy. Oh, it's so adorable. She's adorably clumsy. And J.K. Rowling was like, I gotta give my perfect man an adorable flaw. Oh, he farts, like rancid farts. He can't stop himself. Oh my god! It's like it's just a fetid miasma following this guy around like a cartoon cloud with a big skull and crossbones on it. So anyway, that's Cormoran Strike's most relatable trait in this book. He's a flatulent guy. He's the dank detective, I guess. So and then Robin, her main thing is, you know, she's got problems with men. She can't like she doesn't she's a sapiosexual, I guess. She can only get attracted to someone if she's, you know, if they have a close bond. And that's on account of the sexual assault that she had in her past. In That's briefly mentioned in the first chapter. Um, so this book just, like I said, it just kind of, it rambles, and I feel like a detective story. It should be to the point. Of most, I mean, any book, the worst thing a book can do is be boring. You want a book to touch you or, you know, elicit some sort of reaction, whether it's, you know, joy or anger or fear or disgust. I mean, anything is better than boredom. And that I think is the worst thing you can do as a writer, is just write something that's just dull. And that is what this is. It is dull. J.K. Rowling, she has much more interest in making you understand just how persecuted she is online than in telling a compelling story. And a book, especially a detective story, there's a look, a detective story is not easy to do. You know, you got to set up a mystery. You got to set up these suspects so they all have motives. Who could it be? And you're playing this game with the reader where part of the fun is giving enough clues that the reader can figure it out before the end, but also being subtle enough that they don't. So when the end happens, they're like, "Oh, of course, I should have seen that coming, but I didn't." And this book, not really. The this it takes forever to get where it's going. It really has no respect for the reader's time, which is the biggest sin of all in a story. And when the suspects are introduced, it's hard to really keep them straight. Like I said, you got like a dozen people in this forum who just keep talking to each other. There's some guy who does like kind of a like a Gamergate style YouTube show. We actually get to see this at length. J.K. Rowling shows has Cormoran Strike watching it, so we get to see his whole thing. And I guess she kind of captures the shtick of like, you know, angry alt-right culture war YouTuber type guys. It's not it, but it's not very pleasant because it also it's not that it's unpleasant to read. I mean, it should be unpleasant. She's obviously, this is an unpleasant character, and we should have that reaction. But again, it's mostly him. We're watching Cormoran Strike watch this guy on YouTube, and he is reading tweets and saying those tweets that say that I killed her are bad, they're wrong, and here's why. And so he's literally just doing the same thing, and this just goes on. So we're just a whole book like this. Um, so the last thing, actually, I should say, I've talked for a while about this, and I think I've talked enough. I think you've listened to me ramble long ago, and so long enough, and so unlike J.K. Rowling, I'm going to try and respect your time and wrap this up. But the one last thing that I do want to do is I'd like to read the opening paragraph for the Ink Black Heart, because I feel like this really sets the tone for the whole book. I've never read a first paragraph that was like so strange to me. Like I read it and I was like, I just kind of thought like, maybe this will make sense as I read more of the book as we continue along this journey. And I'm going to tell you right now, this first paragraph does not make more sense as we continue this journey. The events related in this don't really come up again. So let's take a look at the very first paragraph of the the Inky Heart, the Ink Heart. J.K. Rowling's Ink Stink. Okay. Oh wait, how do I? Just one second. I guess I got to scroll all the way back to the very beginning of the book. Scrolling, 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 scrolling. Here we go. Oh, okay. Here we go. Here we go. Boy, every chapter also begins with a little poem, which is, I guess, I mean, kind of, it's a little pretentious for a detective story, but okay. All right. So first paragraph. Of all the couples sitting in the Rivoli bar at the Ritz that Thursday evening, the pair that was having the most conspicuously good time was not, in fact, a couple. Cormorant Shrike and Robin Ellicott, private detectives, business partners, and self-declared best friends, were celebrating Robin's 30th birthday. Both had been slightly self-conscious on first arriving at the bar, which resembled an Art Deco jewel box, with its walls of dark wood and gold and its frosted panels of Lalique glass, because each was aware that this outing was unique in the almost 5 years they'd known each other. Never before had they chosen to spend an evening in each other's company outside work, without the presence of other friends or colleagues, or the pretext of injury, because there had been an occasion a few weeks previously when Shrike had accidentally given his partner 2 black eyes and bought her a takeaway curry as recompense. So they've been self-declared best friends for 5 years. They've never been together outside of work, though. So I guess maybe that's what the self-declared best friend part is about. That they're really not very good friends. Though later in the book, it doesn't really come up. That they never get to that point where Shrike is like, I really don't know Robin that well. Maybe I should change that. That never comes up or anything like that. So as far as we know, they are actually supposed to be best friends, self-declared. Then there's that description of the bar just kind of jammed in there. Okay, she does that a lot in this book. You're getting a lot of descriptions of fancy restaurants and bars because I assume that's where J.K. Rowling spends like all of her time these days. Like she isn't like a normal person. She's too rich. So she's not like in her Scottish castle, holed up being scared of like a trans person with a sign. She's probably going to like all the fancy restaurants and looking at fancy decor and being like, oh, Lalique glass. My readers will be very interested to know about that. And then there's that weird bit at the end of the paragraph where Shrike apparently somehow gave Robin 2 black eyes and so bought her a curry as to make up for that, which, I mean, I don't know what incident that's referring to. I assume that's something that happens in a previous book, never comes up in this one. So it just makes it sound like Cormorant Strike is a weirdo abuser, because it's like he gave her 2 black eyes and then just bought her a curry. That hardly seems okay. But I guess they really like curries in this book. Like I said, they're eating a lot of takeaway and farting a lot, or at least Strike is. So really what this all boils down to is J.K. Rowling. This is her manifesto. She's not being explicitly transphobic in this one. So if you're reading this book in a vacuum, other than a few, subtle digs at non-binary people, you wouldn't really think much of that. But knowing J.K. Rowling's, internet presence and her previous books, which include, heavily coded trans Rita Skeeter in Harry Potter, also the several transvestite killers in previous books, which I know that, J.K. Rowling keeps doing that thing where she's like, oh, they're not trans people, they're transvestites. It's totally different. I'm not being transphobic at all. And it's like, yeah, okay, we can read between the lines. I mean, we can figure that out. I mean, also, like, as a transvestite, I'm like, oh, I mean, okay. I mean, that's doesn't doesn't really placate me, but you know. But anyway, so coming in informed with a little bit of knowledge, it's not hard to be like, oh yeah, she's mad at people online, and she's trying, she's trying to keep the transphobia a little quiet in this one, probably because she's trying to like say stuff so that like you'll get it, but at the same time, like dimwit pundits will be like, oh, I don't see any transphobia in this one. I don't see anything problematic in this one. It looks totally fine. And again, she's mostly in this one seems to be harping a lot more on disabled people. So I think she did get a little bit of flack for that, and I'm sure that she was just like, "Whoa, Cormorant Stripe's missing a leg. I don't understand why you're so mad at me." Um, the biggest sin of this book, though, is just it's so long and just rambling. J.K. Rowling. Oh, I should mention one last thing. This is a little harder to describe, but if you read the book, or at least a chapter, I think you'll understand what I'm saying. Is J.K. Rowling in this book has a very weird way of breezing over important things and then pausing and giving us really in-depth, point by point, blow by blow descriptions of unimportant things. So like there's these major plot points that will happen and we never see them. They just get described to us afterwards by an omniscient narrator. But other times when J.K. Rowling wants to make like a joke about something, she'll pause and there'll be these long dialogues between characters talking about things that really don't have anything to do with the story or anything. They're just there so that we can kind of have a larf. Like early on, there's this very long discussion that Robin has. Her dad is a professor of sheep reproduction, which I do not know if that's actually a thing. I'm going to assume it probably is, but it's very obviously been chosen here so that J.K. Rowling can shoehorn in some really forced jokes about like sheep shagging. And it's like, okay, I mean, these jokes aren't really that funny to begin with, and they're less funny because I can really tell that you deliberately chose this ridiculous profession for Robin's dad just so that you could make these jokes. It doesn't feel like it naturally flows from anywhere. And this happens throughout the book. Later on, like there's a bit where one of the detectives in the agency, or I should say all the contractors, are discussing their exes because of course, we're always discussing exes in this book. Everyone's just got so many shitty failed relationships. I'm sorry, J.K. Rowling. I mean, sorry you've unlucky in love, but you know what? Maybe that's something you should discuss with your therapist instead of letting the entire world know. But anyway, there's one of the discussions of exes where one of the detectives is all like, she's like, oh, me me ex sent me their knickers in the mail. Brr. And it's like, oh, okay, that's weird. Wait, no, it was like she was mad because her ex-husband had an affair with some woman, and the woman sent the husband's underwear to the detective in the mail, I guess as a, I got your man, which is kind of a weird thing to do. I mean, usually you don't want the jilted spouse to know, but I guess she's really rubbing her face in it, whatever. So then the detective says, well, they're all like, what did you do in response? And this particular contractor says, well, I, I put something in the mail, sent back. I gave her something in the mail, sent back. And it's very heavily implied that what this woman did was she took a shit in a box and mailed it to the mistress. and everyone in the detective agency thinks this is hilarious. They're all having a good laugh about this. Now, if I were there, I'd be like, you took a shit in a box and put that in the mail and in the postage, and you mail that to another person through the mail. That is psychotic. That is a thing a psychotic person would do. Excuse my ableism there. That is not a rational thing to do. And if I met someone who did that, I would be like, that's weird. That's weird. I mean, I guess it's kind of funny, but it's also, that's fucked up. That's real fucked up. And I would not be like, and I don't know, I feel like that would kind of, my work relationship with that person might be a little altered after that. I'd never be able to look at them and not think of like, that person took a shit in a box and put it in the mail. But anyway, but it's a funny joke, so J.K. Rowling really wants to make sure to get that in. So thank you for joining me for this little talk about J.K. Rowling's Inky Heart, and thanks for your support here on Patreon, and maybe we'll do some more of these. Maybe we'll get a little more into horror in some future installments if this is a fun thing to do. Anyway, you have a good rest of the day. Bye.